What's going on, Not Move Nation? Welcome to the Not Move podcast. Today is November 28th at 10:10 a.m. Eastern Time. We have one football game on today. The Chicago Bears at Philadelphia Eagles. First, I'd like to say thank you to our subscribers, supporters, followers. We really appreciate you guys. Also, a special thank you to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right. So I hope everybody had a great day yesterday. It's nice that we have football on a Friday. Today have the Chicago Bears at Philadelphia Eagles. I wasn't able to do my normal thorough research on this game, but we'll still have some good information here. Chicago leads the all-time series 29-17-1 against Philadelphia, but Philadelphia has won 6 games in a row against Chicago. Last that I checked, Philadelphia is favored by 7, and the over-under is 44.5. Philadelphia, in the 17 games that they have won against Chicago, 8 of those games they won by 7+ points. So more times than not in games throughout history, Philadelphia has beat Chicago in. They have won by a margin of victory of 6 points or less. 3 of the last 10 meetings between these teams have had a combined total of 45+ points. So more times than not in the last 10 meetings, it's gone under this 44.5 total. Now, Chicago and Philadelphia are both 7-4 against the spread this season. Now, in regards to the over-under, Chicago is better to the over than Philly is. Chicago 6-4-1 to the over. Philadelphia is 5-6 to the over. Chicago's hot right now, man. They've won 4 games in a row. They just beat Pittsburgh last week, and Philadelphia, dropped that game to Dallas in that game that they were up 21-0 in. So it'll be interesting to see how Philadelphia bounces back in this game today here. Overall, give Chicago a pretty good passing advantage, good size passing advantage, slight rushing advantage, big third down conversion advantage, a slight red zone attempts per game advantage, slight sacks on the quarterback advantage, a big turnover differential advantage. The only true advantage I give Philadelphia, and it's a big advantage, is the red zone conversion advantage. They may have other advantages, maybe in the kick return game or something like that. I think Philadelphia's been pretty decent at like blocking field goals this season. Just didn't have time to look up the special teams information, but that may be what this game comes down to. But let's go over some player props. Let's start with, hey, good morning, blessed up P. Yeah, I really did, man. I hope you did as well. Thank you so much. Yesterday was crazy in the NFL. Yeah, it was, man. I think I didn't get any money line picks correct yesterday, but 2 of the spreads that I predicted happened. It was the Cowboys plus the 3.5, and then the Bengals plus 7. But yeah, money line yesterday, 0-for-3. I thought Baltimore was going to win, Detroit, and Kansas City. So here we are again today, man. So I want to talk about the rushing advantage. I want to talk about the rushing attack first and foremost for a couple of reasons in this matchup here today. One of the reasons is because I'm seeing that wins. I'm looking at rotogrinders.com, ROTO grinders.com /weather/NFL. And what they're reporting on here is that there should be 15 mile per hour sustained winds at kickoff. And then it should be dropping to around 10 mile per hour sustained winds later in the game, but wind gusts throughout the game should be between 25 and 30 miles per hour. So, that could definitely have a little bit of impact on some deeper throws, some longer kicks. But not just that, but both of these teams really do like to focus on running the ball in regards to their play calling style. Chicago ranks 23rd in passing play percentage, so they call a higher percentage of rushing plays than league average. Philadelphia calls the third highest percentage of rushing plays in the NFL. They rank 30th in passing play percentage. So both of these teams focus on the run a lot more in regards to that play calling style. And, but, just because teams focus on the run doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good at passing. Now, Philadelphia hasn't accumulated a ton of passing yards per game this year. They rank 23rd. But the Bears, they're picking up some quality yardage through the air per game. They rank 12th in passing yards per game. But, let's talk about this rushing attack first and foremost. Excuse me. Yes, it's windy and cold in NYC, so Philly should have similar weather, says Blessed Up P. Right on, man. Okay, so Chicago ranks second in rushing yards per game this season. Philadelphia ranks 18th in rushing yards allowed per game. So Chicago's been really good at picking up yards per game on the ground this season, and Philadelphia's below average at limiting teams from picking up rushing yards per game. Philadelphia is actually worse at preventing the passing yards allowed per game. They rank 22nd in that category. So in regards to, yardage allowed relative to other teams in the league, Philadelphia is stronger at defending against the run. Something that I noticed is that Philadelphia ranks, before the week started, they ranked 9th worst in rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. So that had me looking at Caleb Williams a little bit for his rushing yards. He's gone over the 20.5 rushing yard line in 7 out of 11 games this season. He's had 10-plus rushing yards in 9 out of 11 games this season. He's never played against Philadelphia throughout his short career. And he's averaged more yards per carry at home than on the road in both seasons that he's been in the NFL, which is a bad trend, since he's playing on the road today. And then he's had more yards per carry in games that his team lost than wins or loses in both career seasons. Now, 2 seasons, that's a small sample size, but it is something. And, if you think that Chicago is going to lose this game today, I think that there is a better chance for Caleb Williams to go over the 20.5 rushing yards based on this trend. But I don't like the fact that he's averaged more yards per carry at home than on the road in both seasons that he's been in the NFL. So, if the Bears end up winning this game, I don't think Caleb Williams goes over that. If they lose, I think he does go over that. Overall, we'll talk about the prediction I have here in a minute. Let's see here. DeAndre Swift. Now, Philadelphia, they were not specifically great or terrible at defending rushing yards to that running back position this season, somewhere in the middle of the pack. So, DeAndre Swift, running back for the Bears, he's gone over the 39.5 rushing yard total in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 30-plus rushing yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. In his 2 career games against Philadelphia, he had 144 rushing yards and 27 rushing yards. So he's gone over that line in 1 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia. And then he has also scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia. So, if you're thinking about DeAndre Swift today, I think that's Those are pretty solid numbers. I would feel a little bit more comfortable at 25 plus rushing yards. And then, because he's had 30 plus rushing yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. That's good, 90%. And then, he had 144 in one game against Philadelphia and then 27 in the other. So if we took it down to 25 plus, that's, 2 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia. And then I didn't see any convincing splits. Now, this field, from my understanding, is on a hybrid surface. So they use grass and turf. So I didn't look into the turf versus grass splits for this game on how players perform, with on turf versus grass. But, every other trend that I saw with Swift was inconsistent. His home versus road splits and his other splits. Okay, so I think that looks pretty solid there. And then Monungai, I believe this is his first season in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's a rookie. So over under 35.5 rushing yards. He's only gone over that in 3 out of 11 games this season, but he's had 20 plus rushing yards in 7 out of 11 games this season. It's much tougher for me to target rookie player props because I don't have a lot of information to work with. But he has barely averaged more yards per carry on the road than at home this season, which is a good trend if you're liking him. And then he's averaged more yards per carry when his team wins or ties rather than loses this season. He actually has 4 rushing touchdowns when his team wins versus 0 when his team loses. And then that's all I got about for him. So, I don't really have a strong opinion about Monungai. I think he's pretty decent. He's been good this season. But I'm going to have to lean more towards Swift going over his rushing yards, 39.5. Once again, I'd feel more comfortable at 25 plus, 30 plus, I think is manageable as well. And then let's see. I like Jalen Hurts, says Blessed up here. I like Jalen Hurts for passing yards over 200. And I'm liking his rushing yards since it's windy today. Yeah, let's talk about that rushing attack here for Philadelphia. So Chicago ranks 28th in rushing yards allowed per game, and they rank 21st in passing yards allowed per game. So they are weaker against the rush than the pass relative to other teams in the league in regards to yards allowed per game. And Philadelphia ranks 21st in rushing yards per game, 23rd in passing yards per game. So they're better at running the ball relative to the other teams in the league in yards picked up per game. And Chicago, before the week started, allowed the 5th most rushing yards to quarterbacks and the 8th most rushing yards to running backs. They also allowed the 3rd most rushing yards per attempt out of any team in the league. So let's start with Jalen Hurts. 32.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in only 4 out of 11 games this season, but he's had 20 plus rushing yards in 7 out of 11 games this season. He's played 1 career game against the Bears and had 61 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. He's had more rushing yards per attempt in games that his team loses rather than wins or ties in 5 out of 6 career seasons. So I do think that there is a stronger likelihood that Jalen Hurts goes over this line if the Eagles lose today based on that trend. But the anytime touchdown, he had 3 in his only career game against Chicago. And I want to go look real quick, Hurts versus Bears. I want to go look real quick to see if the Eagles won that game. Yeah, they won by exactly 5 points. And that's kind of where I'm leaning towards today as well. Philadelphia winning by exactly 5 points. Um, but and yeah, how many yards did he pick up? I mean, he picked up 61 rushing yards in that game. Also, let's go look at real quick how many touchdowns the Bears have allowed to quarterbacks this season relative to other teams in the league. They've allowed 3. The most that any team has allowed is the Cowboys with 6. So the Bears have their defense has allowed some rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks today. And this is probably going to be my favorite touchdown scorer for Philadelphia today. I think he could possibly get multiple ones with that history that he has. And I know that he's capable of, picking up multiple touchdowns in a game. I mean, this season he's had 2 already. One last week against Dallas, and then, believe it or not, one time in week 1 against Dallas. So we'll go back and talk about his passing yards here in just a second, but I want to talk about Saquon Barkley's rushing yards real quick. Let's see what Blessed Up P has to say here. 4 out of 5 last quarterbacks hit their rushing yard lines, except for Tyler Huntley, who fell short by 4 yards to cover his 25.5. Flacco had 47 rushing yards against the Bears. That's great information. Hurts and Celeb for a touchdown is a great look. I feel I'll be locking that in. Right on, man. Yeah, I'm thinking Hurts finds his way in the end zone today. And here's really another reason why, is because Barkley. Where just a second, Barkley has never scored a touchdown in 5 career games against Chicago. And, I mentioned that Philadelphia really likes to run the ball. They're run focused. And if Barkley doesn't score the touchdown in the running game, it kind of leaves Hurts open. Maybe a backup running back or something for Philly. Who do they got back there as their backup? It's a pretty solid backup, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't look into his career history or anything against. Okay, let's see. Bigsby, Shipley. I didn't look at their histories against Chicago, but if Barkley doesn't get in, I'm thinking Hurts, is going to have to be that guy. So let's talk about Barkley's rushing yards. He's gone over the 79.5 rushing yard line in only 3 out of 11 games this season. And even if you wanted to take that down to 70 plus rushing yards, he still has only gone over that in 3 out of 11 games this season. But once you get it to 60, you're looking at 5 out of 11, 50 plus rushing yards for Barkley, 6 out of 11 games this season. The good thing about Barkley is that he has gone over the 79.5 rushing yard line in 3 out of 5 career games against Chicago. And then he's averaged more yards per carry on the road than at home in 6 out of 8 career seasons that he's played in, which is not a good trend since he's playing at home today. So I would have to lean more towards Barkley not getting that and Hurts going over his rushing yards based on these statistics. But you might have a reason today why you love Barkley to go over the rushing yards. I haven't had as much time to look at this as normal, and I know some people, specialize in Philadelphia Eagles. They live, breathe, and eat Philadelphia Eagles football. So maybe you have a better reasoning than I do about Barkley going over or under today. But that's what I have in my notes here today. But I do think that there is a possibility. I would probably be leaning more towards Barkley going over his receiving yards today, or maybe receptions. Let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll talk about Hurts' passing yards. Blessed up P. All right, so I mentioned that Chicago ranks 21st in passing yards allowed per game, so they're below average in that category. Chicago has allowed the fourth most 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. I need to go back to the rushing yards and talk about this. But Chicago has allowed the fourth most 20-plus yard receiving gains this season, and Barkley has had two 20-plus yard receiving gains, which adds to my comfort level of him reaching that 19 and a half, over 19 and a half receiving yard line. He has gone over this line more times than not this season. He's had 10-plus receiving yards in 6 out of 11 games this season as well. So if you're thinking about dropping that from 19 and a half to 10-plus, you're looking at the same, 6 out of 11 times this season. He's gone over that. But he's averaged more yards per reception at home than on the road in every season that he's played in, except for one, which is a good trend since he's playing at home today. And then he's gone over this line in 2 out of 5 career games against Chicago. So I would have to lean towards Barkley getting that today. I also just want to mention that Chicago wasn't extremely good or terrible at defending against receiving yards to running backs, allowed to running backs, or receptions allowed to running backs at the start of the week. And then Barkley over under 2.5 receptions. He's gone over that more times than the receiving yards this season. He's hit the 3+ receptions in 7 out of 11 games this season. If we took that to 2+, you're looking at 9 out of 11 times this season he's gone over that. But he's only gone over that in 1 out of 5 career games against Chicago, the 2.5 reception line. It's only gone over that in 1 out of 5 compared to the 2 out of 5 with the receiving yards. But he's had 2+ receptions in 3 out of 5 career games against Chicago. I think the 2+ receptions is looking solid here. We're looking at 9 out of 11 games this season and 3 out of 5 career games against Chicago. Not a bad look. That's the way I would be leaning towards with Barkley today. And then let's talk about Jalen Hurts with the passing attack here. Chicago wasn't extremely vulnerable or great at defending against the passing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. Jalen Hurts over under 210.5 passing yards. I believe Blessed Up P said that he likes Jalen Hurts for 200+. Let's talk about it a little bit here. He's gone over the 210.5 in 5 out of 11 games this season. Let's see. Oh, I think I might have been wrong about what I just wrote above. Okay. Thanks for letting us know, though. Jalen Hurts, over under 210.5 passing yards. He's gone over that line in 5 out of 11 games this season. He's had 200+ passing yards in the same amount of games this season. So, taking him from 210.5 to 200+, we're still looking at the same success rate this season. But once we get to 175+, he's gone over that in 7 out of 11 games this season. But I do like that in his only career game against Chicago, he had 315 passing yards. And I think it was, 3 rushing touchdowns? So he performed great in that game. I didn't get a chance to look at his splits, road versus and I can see if I can just browse it real quick. Jalen Hurts, let's go look at his history here. Let's see if he's averaging more yardage per passing yardage on the road or at home. Looks like there's just some inconsistencies there with his home versus road splits. Yeah, there's some inconsistencies there. 1 year it's this he's doing more on the road. 1 year he's doing better on the at home. What about wins versus losses? Looks like those are inconsistent too. So, and then I'm not going to look at the turf versus grass splits since this is on a hybrid field, and they don't have it filtered that way. So, and then the passing touchdowns for Hurts over under 1.5. He's gone over that in 5 out of 11 games this season as well. He's had 1+ passing touchdowns in 8 out of 11 games this season, but he had 0 passing touchdowns in his only career game against Chicago. So I don't know how much I like his passing touchdowns today. And if I had to pick him to, with the passing yards, probably take it down to 175 plus. But which way do I lean towards him going over or under the passing yards? I like that history there. I mean, it's only one game, very small sample size, but he did have 315 passing yards in his only career game against Chicago. Chicago's not good against the pass. My only concern about Hurts going over that line is the fact that Philadelphia likes to call a high percentage of rushing plays. Could be a little bit windy there today. Maybe they jump ahead 21-0 again this week and don't look back and just milk the clock, So, but I'd have to lean for him to go over that 210.5 too, Ivan. Maybe not one of my favorite props today, but I was thinking that Barkley receiving props look good. The Hurts anytime touchdown sounded appetizing there. Okay, so we're gonna stay on that passing attack, but I said I wanted to. I said that I wanted to touch back up on the rushing explosive plays allowed. Okay. The explosive rushing plays allowed by Chicago, specifically. Chicago has allowed the 4th most 20+ yard rushing gains this season and the 3rd most 40+ rushing yard gains this season. So, Barkley this year, he's had only 2 20+ yard rushing gains and 1 40+ yard rushing game. Hurts has had 1 20+ yard rushing gain and 0 40+ this season. But I think that's an added benefit for this Eagles rushing attack. I feel like there's a stronger likelihood that they could break out for a bigger run today than in previous games against other teams. And just in this game, I think there's a better chance Philadelphia breaks out for a bigger rushing gain than Chicago does, even though Chicago picks up more rushing yards per game. But let's stay on this passing attack here for Philadelphia. Chicago was not extremely great or terrible at defending against that wide receiver position before the week started in regards to yards allowed. But they did pretty good at defending against receptions. They ranked 8th best before the week started in receptions allowed to wide receivers. So that had me looking more towards receiving yards for Philadelphia Eagles players today. We have A.J. Brown over under 57.5 receiving yards. He's only gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season, but he's had 40+ receiving yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. But he's had 100+ receiving yards in 2 career games against Chicago. He's played, 2 career games against them and had 181 receiving yards and 101 receiving yards. He also scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Chicago, and he leads Philadelphia in red zone targets with 9. So I mentioned at the start of the segment that Philadelphia has a big red zone conversion rate advantage against Chicago. And I also just want to add that Chicago has allowed the 4th most touchdowns to wide receivers this season. So I think he's definitely a candidate here to score today. And I don't think I saw any of the home versus road splits that I'm looking at my notes from last week on A.J. Brown, and I would have wrote it down if I saw that there were there was a favorable trend in his road versus home splits. The only thing that I have here is that he's averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass. Once again, I'm not looking into that stuff today because this is on a hybrid playing surface, from my understanding. So, I'd feel more comfortable with Brown at 40 plus receiving yards, but let's go back here in just a second and look at the explosive plays that Chicago allows, okay, through the air. Devontae Smith, over under 53.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in 6 out of 11 games this season. So more than half of his games, he's gone over that, which is better than A.J. Brown. And then he's had 40-plus receiving yards in 8 out of 11 games this season. Excuse me. He's played one career game against Chicago and had 126 receiving yards. He did not score a touchdown in that game against Chicago, and he ranks 3rd on Philadelphia in red zone targets with 6. So let's go to these explosive plays real quick, too. Chicago has allowed the 4th most 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. All right. And A.J. Brown has 8 total 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. Devontae Smith has had 10 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. And even Dotson has had 4. So just in that regard, Devontae Smith looks like he has the better chance. But look, Devontae Smith has also played 1 extra game than A.J. Brown. So really both of these guys are capable of picking up those 20-plus yard gains. I think I like A.J. Brown more again here today. I know he hasn't gone over his receiving line as much as Devontae Smith has gone over his this season, but he's played, A.J. Brown's played 2 career games against Chicago. Both of these guys have had at least 1 career game against Chicago, and they both had 100-plus receiving yards. But, A.J. Brown, and we can go look at target share as well, for Philadelphia. Devontae Smith technically leads the team in target share, but once again, he's played 1 extra game than A.J. Brown. He only has 3 extra targets than A.J. Brown this season. But Devontae Smith does have a higher catch rate. He's catching 71% of the passes, targets that he's receiving, and A.J. Brown's only getting 61%. So, but I do like, whether or not, I suppose I'd have to lean towards A.J. Brown going over that receiving yards. And I kind of wonder how many times that they both have gone over that line this season. Can they coexist? That would be a question. I typically would rather pick one player or the other going over his receiving yards. But if they, can coexist, it just depends on how many times that they have gone over those receiving yards together. Last week against Dallas, 89 for Devontae Smith, 110 for A.J. Brown. So I think that they really can coexist. Just once again, a concern that I have is that Philadelphia calls a high percentage of rushing plays. It could be a little bit windy today. And if they get ahead early and hold on to that lead. But I think I do like A.J. Brown at least to score a touchdown, right? I think Jalen Hurts would be my favorite player in this game to score a touchdown for Philadelphia, and then it would be A.J. Brown. I like the fact that A.J. Brown leads Philadelphia in red zone targets with 9. I like the fact that he has had a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Chicago. compared to Devontae Smith, who did not get one in his only career game against Chicago, and Dotson, who did not get one in his only game against Chicago. But, last I checked, Dotson's over-under receiving yards was at 8.5, which he's gone over in half of his games this season. He's actually had 20-plus receiving yards in 4 out of 10 games this season. And in his only career game against Chicago, he had 30 receiving yards. I didn't get a chance to look at Dotson's splits, but, if you have that time, maybe this isn't a bad look here. Looks like this season at home, many more yards per catch at home this season. He's played 4 seasons in the NFL. Dotson, he's had more yards per reception in 3 out of 4 career seasons at home than on the road. Let me look at these wins and tie trends. He has more. That's a split trend, 2-2. So, but yeah, I think that's a decent look here if you like Dotson today. Doesn't look too bad. Let's see. Blessed Up says I'm hangover and lost. Right. What stat I was looking at? Oh, it's okay, man. I understand the day after Thanksgiving and everything. Once again, I hope you guys had a great time with your families yesterday, and thanks for joining the podcast today. So, yeah, let's continue talking about the passing attack. Dallas Goedert, tight end for Philadelphia. Chicago has allowed the 10th most receiving yards to tight ends this season. When I was looking at this information before the games yesterday, they ranked 10th worst in that category, and then 5th worst in receptions allowed to tight ends. Goddard, over under 36.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in only 4 out of 10 games this season, but he's had 30-plus receiving yards in half of his games. And then if we took that down to 20-plus receiving yards, he's gone over that in 8 out of 10 games this season. He has gone over the 36.5 receiving yard line in 1 out of 2 career games against Chicago. In the game that he did not go over, he had 20 receiving yards in that game. So I mentioned he's had 20-plus receiving yards in 8 out of 10 games this season, and he's also had 20-plus receiving yards in both career games against Chicago. He did score a touchdown in his in 1 out of 2 career games against Chicago, and he ranked second on Philadelphia in red zone targets with 7. So he's not far behind A.J. Brown in those red zone targets. But when I was looking at Chicago's defense, it seemed like they were a little bit better at defending against touchdowns allowed to the tight end position more than the wide receiver position. Now, typically, more teams are going to be allowing receiving touchdowns to wide receivers than tight ends. That's just how it works. But also I like to look at like the relative to other teams in the league. What are they allowing? And they're about average at defending against the tight end touchdowns compared to that wide receiver position, which they're very vulnerable to. And then just to give you another idea, looks like they're about average, maybe slightly above average at defending against rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. The receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs, they've allowed 3 this season, which adds upside for Barkley anytime touchdown. But as I mentioned earlier, Barkley hasn't had a touchdown in 5 career games against Chicago, and he's only had 2 receiving touchdowns this season. But that does add a little bit of extra upside for Barkley to find his way into the end zone today. But I still, I like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown more. Goddard could get in there, just not necessarily. I like the other 2 more. And then the receptions for Goddard, he's gone over the 3.5 reception line in 4 out of 10 games this season. But he's had 3+ receptions in 7 out of 10 games this season. 2+ receptions in 9 out of 10 games this season. And he's actually had exactly 4 receptions in both career games against Chicago, 4 and 4. So, and then once again, guys, Chicago has allowed the 5th most receptions allowed to tight ends this season. So, yeah, I mean, I would feel more comfortable with him dropping that line down, much like many other props. Feel more comfortable taking him at 20+ receiving yards and 2+ receptions. But I don't even think 3+ receptions looks bad. 4+ receptions. Once again, he's only gone over that in 4 out of 10 games this season, but he did have exactly 4 receptions in both career games against Chicago. So it sounds like it might be a sweat in regards to that. Looks like that could be one of the sweatier props. Now let's talk about Chicago's passing game. Chicago. Well, let's talk about Caleb Williams' passing yards real quick. Philadelphia hasn't been great nor terrible at defending against passing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. But last that I checked, Caleb Williams' passing yards over under 206.5. He's gone over that line in 9 out of 11 games this season. The games that he didn't go over, he had 172 and 193 passing yards. And he hasn't played against Philadelphia throughout his short career. I can go look real quick at Caleb Williams' game log here on ESPN.com, filter this by splits, and see if he has more passing yards per attempt on the road versus home. Last season, he had more at home. This season, it's tied. And then wins and losses versus ties. He's had more passing yards this season per attempt when his team wins or ties, and same with last season. So I think there is a stronger likelihood of Caleb Williams going over those passing yards if his team wins. But man, it's still not looking like a terrible prop here. 9 out of 11 games this season, he's gone over that line, which is nice. That's one of the better higher success rates, if not the highest success rate that I see out of all the players today. And then the passing touchdowns, he's got 2+ passing touchdowns in 4 out of 11 games this season. He's had 1+ passing touchdown in 8 out of 11 games this season. Once again, he hasn't played against Philadelphia throughout his short career. Before we move on, I want to thank our sponsors: BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so I also want to mention the explosive receiving plays allowed by Philadelphia. All right. Philadelphia has allowed the 7th most 20+ yard receiving gains out of any team in the league, and the 2nd most 40+ yard receiving gains this season. I mean, so they're allowing a good chunk of yardage during those completions. And Chicago is good at picking up yards. Big plays. Odunze has 13 20+ yard receiving gains this season. He doesn't have a 40+ yard receiving gain, but 13 20+. Swift, he's had 3 20+ yard receiving gains this season and 2 40+ yard receiving gains. DJ Moore has 7 20+ yard receiving gains this season and 1 40+ yard. Burden has 5 20+ and 1 40+. So all of these guys have big play capabilities for Chicago. Let's talk about DeAndre Swift first and foremost. Philadelphia has allowed the 4th most receiving yards to running backs this season. before yesterday's games. That's what I saw. DeAndre Swift over under 12.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 10 plus receiving yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. But DeAndre Swift has gone over the 12.5 receiving line in both career games that he's ever played against Philadelphia. He also had a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia. And he has more yards per catch when his team wins or ties rather than loses in his 6-year career in 5 of those seasons. So 5 out of 6 career seasons, more yards per catch when his team wins or ties rather than loses. So I do think that this is a good look here today. DeAndre Swift to go over these receiving yards, regardless if his team wins or loses. But if the Bears win, I think there is a stronger likelihood. So if you like the Bears to win this game, I think there is a stronger likelihood that DeAndre Swift goes over those receiving yards. And then Philadelphia has allowed the 8th most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. Let's talk about Odunze. I mentioned up here that he has had 13 20-plus receiving yards, 13 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. And, Philadelphia has allowed the 7th most 20-plus yard receiving gains this season. And, I think that adds value to Odunze here. Over under 48.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in more than half of his games this year. He's gone over that line in 6 out of 11 games this season. He's had 40-plus receiving yards in 7 out of 11 games this season. He's had 30-plus. So we took that down to 30-plus. We're looking at 10 out of 11 games this season. He's hit that line. Now, he's never played any career games against Philadelphia. He has averaged more yards per catch on the road than at home in 2 seasons that he's been in the NFL. So that's a good trend here as well. The fact that he's on the road. Now, it's a smaller sample size. It would be nice if we had 10 career seasons for Odunze where he has had more yards per catch on the road than at home in 2 seasons that he's been in the NFL. I think that's still a good trend. It's better than if it were the other way around. So I like what I see here for Odunze today. DJ Moore over under 34.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 8 out of 11 games this season. Another good success rate there. Compared to Odunze, he's gone over his receiving line in only 6 out of 11. DJ Moore, 8 out of 11 games. He's gone over that this season. Even if we drop that down to 30-plus receiving yards, he still has only gone over that in 8 out of 11 games this season. Once we get it to 20-plus, we're looking at 9 out of 11. But he's also gone over his receiving line, the 34.5, in 1 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia. He had 29 and 42 receiving yards. So, maybe 25-plus. 20-plus, I'd feel more comfortable with DJ Moore here. And then he hasn't scored a touchdown in those 2 career games against Philadelphia. And then Luther Burden, I talked about him last week and how we liked him over his receiving yards last week, and I believe he got there. This week, I'm a little bit more skeptical about it simply because he has many more yards per catch at home than on the road this season, and he's playing on the road. But he's averaged many more yards per catch in wins than losses this season. So if you like the Bears to win today, I would have to lean more towards him going over the 31.5 receiving line. But if the Bears do lose, I'd have to more so lean for him not getting there. All right. And then what else did we have here? That was about all of the props that I had time to look for today. It's been a real busy week. This is the 4th NFL game. Usually there's one NFL game on Thursday, and then I have a lot more time to prepare for Sunday shows. So I've been crunching these numbers in as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Let me just browse my notes real quick to see if I have anything else that I wanted to cover here. What did you say, Ivan? I missed a lot. Got busy here at work for a second. It's okay. I appreciate you for joining. I know you do your best to join when you can. If you guys have any questions before I get out of here, I'd be happy to try to address those questions for you guys. Let me just browse my notes to make sure I don't have anything left that I wanted to cover. I mentioned that Philadelphia. I've mentioned this on a previous show. Philadelphia, they started the season off 4-0. And when I was looking at their statistics, when they were 4-0, there was nothing that popped off the charts to me. So just somehow, man, Philadelphia finds ways to win games. And so when I'm looking at the statistics, specifically in games where Philadelphia is involved, I look at Philadelphia's statistics a lot less. I criticize them a lot less because, it's just somehow they end up winning games. I would definitely look at try to find out like special team statistics. I know I mentioned the Eagles. They've blocked a few field goals this season. Maybe Chicago has had a couple field goals blocked or so. That could be another added benefit for Philadelphia in this game. So let's not forget about special teams. Once again, I just haven't had time to look at that. Not Move Podcast says they got the Bears tonight. Man, this one's tough for me. I was 2-1 against the spread yesterday, 0-3 on the money line. So I think that spread is just too big, man. I think Chicago's playing real good ball. They've won 4 games in a row. I like their passing advantage. If they are forced to pass in this game, in the later stages of the game, I think, I have confidence that they get it done. And they have success. They're good at running the ball. I think Philadelphia wins this game by exactly 5 points. I have to lean towards the under in this game, 44.5. So let's go. I think the last time they played, it was 25-20, but that would be over. 24-19 is a weird number. A margin of victory by 5 alone is a weird number, 22-17. 22-17, just a weird number. But yeah, that would be my prediction, I suppose. 22-17, Philadelphia. I don't know how Philly's going to get to 22, but it'll be funny to see if that happens. So anyways, thanks again for joining today, guys, and I will see you guys again on Sunday. Best of luck to you guys today. Thank you so much for joining. Once again, a special thank you to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right. Let's see. Ivan, or Blessed Up, he said, did you touch on Swift? I like him for 55.5 rushing plus receiving. Yeah, I touched on Swift a little bit. And you can go back, obviously, you can go back and watch the film here. But Swift, I was looking at his receiving yards, considering Philadelphia has allowed the 4th most receiving yards to running backs this season. Swift has gone over the 12.5 receiving line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 12.5 receiving yard line in both career games that he's played against Philadelphia. And, Swift used to play for Philadelphia, I wouldn't necessarily consider this a revenge game since Philadelphia didn't trade him, but maybe you do. They didn't sign him. The Bears picked him up in the free agency. So Philadelphia just didn't think of him, fondly enough to sign him. So maybe he does come out and play with a little bit bigger of a chip on his shoulder. I didn't touch on who I think is going to maybe get an anytime touchdown for Chicago too, right? So let's do that before I get out of here. Philadelphia's allowed the second most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. So, if you're thinking about Caleb Williams sneaking in the end zone, you got that working with you. Let's see what else here. Philadelphia, 3 receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs, which is about average or so. Let's go check out Swift. Only has 1 receiving touchdown this season, so I don't see too much of an extra added benefit for that. What about rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs? Philadelphia has allowed 8. Okay, what about these other positions? Philadelphia, man, they've allowed the second fewest wide receiver touchdowns this season and the second fewest touchdowns to tight end. So I'd have to lean towards a rushing touchdown today for Chicago. So Caleb Williams, Swift, or Monungai. Out of the 3, didn't we say Swift has had a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Philadelphia? Revenge game for Swift. I know Kelsey doesn't play for Philadelphia anymore, but Swift, Kelsey. We can look at who are they handing the ball off to I feel like the statistics that I'm going to look at real quick are going to be a little bit skewed. So I'll look at the red zone statistics here for Chicago, right? I'll filter this by red zone rushing. I'm looking at pro-football-reference.com, and I'm looking at who's getting those rushes for Chicago when they're in the red zone this season. Swift, 40%. When they're inside the 20, he's getting 40% of the rushes. Monungai, 31.4%. Caleb Williams, 25.7%. What about that, inside the 5? Swift, 42.9%, tied with Monungai. If I remember correctly, though, Chicago started using Monungai a little bit more as later on in the season, which is why I think the numbers that I'm looking at could be a little bit inaccurate. That's what I would do before I made a decision, right? Is go through the games. Let's see when Monungai actually started picking up some rushing attempts. And did they both play against Pittsburgh and Minnesota? Monungai and Swift. Pittsburgh versus Minnesota. They both played. Swift had more carries against Minnesota. I don't know about red zone carries, but he had more carries. But Monungai had more carries last week against Pittsburgh. I'm specifically interested in the red zone, And if I'm not mistaken, Monungai is kind of that guy now when they're like near the 5 and stuff. Let's go see what happened in this Bears game. Touchdown Bears. Caleb Williams passed to DJ Moore for that first touchdown, 5-yard. Williams passed to Loveland. Did they have a red zone carry? Monungai got that a 2-yard touchdown run last week against Pittsburgh. So, but it was 2nd and goal on the 1, or excuse me, on Pittsburgh's 2, 2nd and goal, and DeAndre Swift got the carry. 1st and goal on Pittsburgh's 8, Monungai got the pickup for 5 yards. And then it was Swift, and then it was Monungai who got the touchdown. So it's tough to tell, on who's going to get that. But I'm gonna say Swift because he does have that career touchdown. He's shown that he can get a touchdown against Philadelphia, and not saying another guy can't, but and that revenge game factor. So yeah, you said Loveland is sneaky. Yeah. But yeah, all in all, guys, I don't necessarily want you to come in here and just blindly tail whatever I'm talking about, right? Want hopefully you guys, are making your own decisions. If you are tailing what I'm talking about, please do so at your own risk. And please do so responsibly. But I just try to get on here and give you guys some more information that you didn't have before you're entering in today's slate. And there's other great information out there. Other people that are very knowledgeable about football and they have a different perspective than I do. They may talk about how Jalen Hurts is really good against the zone instead of man-to-man, and Chicago runs zone, and you know what I mean? So there's all different types of information out there for you guys to give yourself a better chance at success with this stuff. So, but yeah, my favorite touchdown scorer, Hurts, A.J. Brown, DeAndre Swift, and that's about all I got. But yeah, once again, thank you guys so much. I will see you guys on Sunday morning. I believe I usually get on here at about 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We're on a schedule now. I can't think of what time at the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's the time. If you go to the Twitch, it has our schedule on there. And yeah. So thanks again. Once again, thanks to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right. Good luck today, everybody. Good luck. And how about them Cowboys?
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.